Hallelujah, hallelujah, throw a nickel on the grass, save a fighter pilot's ass. Hallelujah, hallelujah, throw a nickel on the grass and you'll be safe.
Cruising down the Yalu 620 per, I call my flight commander. Oh, won't you save me, sir? My guns are out of bullets. My tanks are out of gas. Mayday, mayday, mayday. I got 6 MiGs on my ass. Sing hallelujah, sing hallelujah. When I was a young fighter pilot in Alaska flying F-102s in the early 1960s, and this is a photo I took of my wingman over the Alaska range, we had a number of Korean War veterans who taught us the Korean War fighter pilot songs, which we sang in the club. These songs were later transposed and carried on to Vietnam, and they put in their aircraft and modified them some, but fighter pilot songs go a long ways back. In my video about radar tactics, I described the stern attack, which was very good for both the F-102 and F-106 against bombers. It gave us a good overtake against chaff and a slow enough overtake on ECM, so we had time to work through the ECM. It kept us out of the range of tail guns because we had a fairly long range missile. And in case this happened to turn out to be a fighter, it was a good place to start a dogfight. I want to show you the radar scopes that we looked at during these attacks and describe the details on these scopes. This particular scope was actually from a early F-102 development video. Normally you couldn't get a good video of radar scopes because they had a shield on top of it that you looked through to keep the lights off of the scope so you could see it, and therefore you couldn't really take a picture of the scope. But in this development video, they took care of that and got us some good pictures of what a scope would normally look like. The circle in the top left of the scope is the target marker circle. This is put on there by SAGE, the semi-automatic ground environment, the data link that the F-106 used a lot. It was not used much in the F-102. In Alaska, we didn't have SAGE, and there was no target marker circle. Instead, the radar controller would describe where the target was, and we had to use his word to figure out where it exactly was. The target marker circle then shows where the target is according to SAGE, and they were using that in this test film. The long horizontal line is the artificial horizon. It's just a horizon. This is sort of like an attitude indicator, and on the scope it will appear to go like this and go like this, but that's because you are turning, not it. The world is level and you are the one who is turning. The bottom of the scope shows what we call the main bang. That is the radar of where our radar is sweeping back and forth. And the bright band off to the right is called the Gisle Band. It's called the Gisle Band because it sparkles a little bit. Now it is sweeping back and forth, and picking up targets. As a matter of fact, you can see the target is a bit to the left of center, and it's about 20 degrees port, just as we showed in the tactics video. The sweeping back and forth might seem a bit odd to you because the radar is really sweeping back and forth like this. And this takes that, if it's going back and forth like this, anything that is really close to you is kind of garbaged up in the front. By spreading it out across the whole scope, they give a much better view of what the pilot is looking at. So if you say it's going to be 40 degrees port, you can look over there and say, okay, that's about 40 degrees port. That's where the target's going to be. So this goes back and forth, and the little dot is our target. The main sweep, which we call the Gisle Band, now you can see why we call it the Gisle Band. It kind of sparkles a little bit, and the pilot has to be able to look in there and see which of all the little things that are moving around in there, little sparkles, which is the real target. Now the target might be dropping chaff, or he could be having ECM and putting out false targets. So the pilot's ability to interpret the scope is very important. Now, in this point, the target was within lock-on range. Now we had a kind of a Y stick. It had two handles on it. The first one was fixed, and that was what you flew the airplane with. That was the stick that moved the airplane. The left one was the radar control. We could move that one around like this on top of the stick. We moved it forward to bring a range gate in, and the range gate is where we think the target is. Left and right, we could move the Gisle Band left and right, and we had a roller. We could roll it up to move the antenna up or down. So we could search up there and pinpoint the target. We move the range gate on top of it, and when it's properly lit up, we release it. And the computer says, okay, that's the target, and it locks on. And suddenly we get a lock-on presentation. When you lock on, this presentation appears. You've got the Gisle Band, and just inside the circle there, you can see your target. It is still there, and you can see other things in the Gisle Band, which could be giving you troubles. And there is a big circle. That is the time to go circle. It tells you how much time it is until you're going to fire. And as you get closer, that will collapse. As it collapses, it tells you have less time to fire, and then you'll see it gets a big X when you fire. The break in the time to go circle at about 6 o'clock shows that you have about a 600 knot overtake on this target. So it tells me, first of all, you're guiding pretty correctly because your steering dot is right in the center, so you're doing just what it's supposed to do. And it tells me that the target must be slow because we are closing in on it at about 600 knots, which is pretty fast. So that's a slow target, and in this case, it's a drone. The time to go circle collapses, the pilot pulls the trigger, you can hear the missile bay doors open, the rails extend as the aircraft shutters, there's a whoosh as the missile fires, you get a big X on the scope, you break away, and then you go home and have a drink at the club.
Hallelujah, hallelujah, throw a nickel on the grass, save a fighter pilot's ass. Hallelujah, hallelujah.